certain family, and they made contact with my ex-sister-in-law, and we had her on recording, and she did not know we were listening in. And she admitted that she made the report, and she did it to be vindictive because, quote-unquote, Tanya deserved that. That's what she deserves. She's got things I don't have, and that's just what she deserves. And I was just trying to scare her. So I have her on recording saying that, and admitting it to other immediate family members. So, but what was I going to do at that point? I mean, okay, I know who did it, but I knew anyways. And then she begins to talk about how, well, DHR would have called me because, I mean, I made the report. I mean, they knew I was an option for placement. And his grandmother, being my mother, who was in cahoots with my ex-sister-in-law to take my child from me, in cahoots with making the report, which I know to be fact as well, because this family member that called for me was initially contacted when they were trying to find my child on December 9th, and they thought that this other family member was my mother, and that family member informs, no, I am not, and then calls my ex-sister-in-law, and my mother was there in the background, and they were both discussing this back and forth with this other family member, so my mother was for sure a part of it. And I might add that my ex-sister-in-law, when my brother passed away 6 years ago come this Sunday, she came to the funeral with divorce papers in hand, claiming her rights to a life insurance policy that my mother had taken out on my brother when I was 9, before he ever even knew this woman. And he was 13 and a half years older than me. So I guess he was like, if I was 9, he was like in his early 20s or something. I don't know. That's math I don't want to do right now. And he didn't even know her at that time that the policy was taken out. My mother owned the policy, but she sued my mother for that policy. And my husband and I spent almost $15,000 fighting the sister-in-law. In 2007, my brother died October 30th, 2016. We spent almost $15,000 in 2017 fighting her, so that my mother would not lose what was hers, that she had paid for my brother's entire life. And mother did not lose, but in the end became in cahoots with this woman after my oldest niece had a child who's severely disabled. And that's the niece that also broke in my home and stole all kinds of things and got into our books and stole financial things. And again, that's for another episode. So we leave the building. We've spoken to this family member who is called the ex-sister-in-law, my brother's ex-wife, and she's admitted. So what do you do? We still don't know where our child's at because they never told us in the building where he was, even though I begged and pleaded. Within 2 to 3 hours, I want to say it was around 2.5 hours later, my father called to inform me that my son was being brought to his home by the green worker. Not the worker, but my father calls to tell me. So that was 10 hours had gone by before I knew the location of my child, which was that he was on the way to my father's home via this green worker. And I don't know her from Adam's House Cat, but then to come to find out, we're talking like 20 years old. She's got my son in the car with her. I know nothing about her. Yeah, all the feelings y'all are having right now, yeah, I'm reliving those right now. They're not real fun. It's hard. So you have to bear with me as I become emotional, because this is also the weekend anniversary of my brother's death, and beginning to kind of process through. And as a trauma therapist, I know the importance of doing this too for myself, but this is hard. So he gets to my father's home, within 30 or so minutes, I guess, of my father telling me that he had just been notified that she was bringing him. My husband and I rushed over there. We're like 15 minutes away. And, I can't explain the feeling of seeing my child, but then also knowing I had to tell him that he couldn't come home with me and that he had to stay at his papa's. So everything he knew and life as he knew it was completely stripped from him. No fault of his own or ours. And so we were not allowed any unsupervised contact with him. And then you're supposed to, by policy, complete a safety plan. Well, this green worker didn't bother doing that. And so technically I could have gotten my child and left with him because there was no safety plan. And that's really just a piece of paper. It's not a court order anyways. But we did as we should do, and we left him there for the evening and went home. The next day, we got in touch with the worker. She asked us to go drug screen. Yeah, we get there, and there's no order from DHR. The drug screening place in town, you know, they're like, well, we don't know who you are, what you're talking about. We hadn't had any contact with DHR concerning either one of you, my husband and me. So we had to leave, call DHR back and forth, and then I recorded that too. The green worker was just all over the place, had no idea what she was doing. It was an act of Congress to get this order for this drug screen that they just so desperately needed, because we're going to court the next day within 72 hours, because we're on Tuesday now, the 11th of January. We finally go back into the day right before they close, and drug screen, and spoke to her and told her, you know, we did it. And then I emailed her the prescriptions that I did have for Adderall, but she never bothered to tell me she didn't get them, because I didn't know. I didn't put a dot where it was supposed to go within the email. And then she informs me she's going to my father's house to do a safety plan. And I'm like, okay, well, I have to be a part of that. So, you know, and you need to come to my home, like, because we have court tomorrow. Like, you need to see my home. And so, and not to boast of any of that nature, but we live on 15 acres and 4,000 square foot house that you could eat off the floors. So there's just, you know, she needed to come see what Kingsley lived in. And she told me, well, somebody will be by to do that later. And I went with that, and that she would come and see the home and finish the safety plan, because it's not complete if I, as the parent, my husband as the parent, do not sign it. So she does the safety plan with my father. And the whole time she kept having to call her supervisor, because she didn't have any answers to any of my dad's questions. And it always told me she had to call her supervisor, never had any answers. And nobody ever showed up, nobody ever did a home visit, nobody ever completed that safety plan. And then for court, we show up. We were there all morning, like 8 a.m. till noon, 1 o'clock. I think it was 1 o'clock, 8 p.m. And she never once mentioned the fact that she didn't have my prescriptions. And the GAL, guardian ad litem, which would be my son's attorney that was appointed for him, went up to my father thinking he was the foster dad, because they had it written down that he was in foster care. So she maybe spoke to my child for 3 minutes, and then we go into the courtroom. Mind you, I'm seeing all kinds of colleagues that I'd worked with for years that knew me. It might have been years prior, but I'm not someone you forget easily. And it was very humiliating to go in the courtroom with these people in there and getting to hear all these details, and for the DHR attorney to begin explaining that we had denied access to my son. So then DHR had no way to check on his safety. We had not drug screened as requested, which was a lie. We had not provided prescriptions, which was a lie. Well, she never told me she didn't get them. However, I had an attorney there representing me, and he had my prescriptions, and he was saying that to them, and that we had drug screened. And I know for a fact, and have on recording from the drug screening place, that the DHR worker was aware at 8. She emailed the drug screening facility at 8:56 a.m. and a response was sent to her within the hour that we had drug screened the day prior to court, because she emailed the morning of court. Never once mentioned that she emailed and got a response that we had screened and we were negative to the judge or the DHR attorney, and let the judge sit up there and snatch my child from me. And I'm completely helpless. So then, out of an abundance of caution, the judge states that he needs to remain with the biological maternal grandfather. And I just don't have words. Like, it's so emotional thinking back to that day. Again, I can remember everything I was wearing, the smells, just when trauma happens, you remember everything around you forever. And they went to do an ISP, an individualized service plan, which is just this piece of paper laid out like a chart that says mommy and daddy are going to do X, Y, and Z and get their lives together so they can get their child back. Mind you, we ain't done nothing to deserve the removal. I stormed out of there and did not complete that ISP, nor did I sign it. My husband and father remained behind with my attorney and that green worker, and she had a trainee with her that she was training. Yet she didn't have enough training to do her job to start with. So, I remember sitting outside for almost an hour, like, what am I going to do? Like, this can't be happening. My cousin was there. She did come. And so she came outside with me and sat with me until we left. And then I'm told, well, now the judge wants to change a venue because I used to be a Jefferson County DHR worker. But I was also a DHR worker for other counties and had been in other courtrooms because of other positions I'd held at other jobs throughout an almost 20-year career. So where are you going to change the venue to? So I'm like asking the attorney, and like I have no answers. Like, I literally leave and know nothing. Like, I don't know when and if my child will end up in foster care, if he'll stay with my dad, if I'll ever get him back. Like, every right was just stripped from me, right from under me. And I had done nothing wrong, and neither had my husband. And so I literally leave. I get to flipping through this court order that I never received. So the county never gave me a copy of the court order. I got tired of asking questions to my attorney, so I took myself down to Bessemer, the clerk's office, and was provided a copy of the pickup order that was held for 31 days, which is against the law, a copy of the court order, and the court order was never signed by the judge. Literally, the judge never signed the court order stating all this stuff she had just stripped from me, my child and my rights and all this, the temporary custody placed on my father. Like, and then they ordered me and my husband to do drug screens on a color code. I had to have a psychological evaluation. I had to go to individual counseling. I had to go to family counseling. My husband had to attend one session of family and I believe one session of individual. Like, if you're not in stun mode right now, I don't know. I just don't even have answers. And so when I finally began flipping through this court order, because I got a copy from my attorney. So going to Bessemer to receive the other things came within 2 weeks later. And I go to my attorney's office to explain to him that it was not signed. Ended up firing that attorney. He charged me $150 for coming down there to let him know that the court order was not signed. So how can I be in this predicament when it was not signed? And you're the same attorney that told me you talked to the DHR attorney back in December and that there was not a pickup order. Just to find out, oh, well, I guess there was, because they snatched him and held it for 31 days. I could feel it in my bones. My intuition was so strong, like that something worse was coming down the pipe and I had to do something. And so on that day of court, I had to take a leave of absence from my job, put my social worker hat on, and go fight for my child. And I had to decide, like, where do I even begin? Like, this is just a nightmare. And I didn't care if we lost everything we had as long as I got my child back. Like, you can have everything I've ever owned, had, worked for, earned. My husband and I started out with nothing and built everything we have from the ground up. His plumbing company, the Plumbing Doctor, I'll give a shout out. The Plumbing Doctor in Birmingham, Alabama, that he and I built together from the ground up when we first met. And shortly after we first met. You could have it all, but you cannot have my child. And then my husband has someone that works with him that has been a friend of mine for right at 20 years. And Mike, I'll call him out, picked up the slack for my husband and all the contractors